Hey everybody, welcome to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast, a special episode talking about a very special Saturday Dynamite. And because it's not our normal podcast, you don't get a movie quote today. So, as they say, no soup for you. Joining me today, I am Griff from GA. We've got Craig, the creator of Pro Wrestling Musings, and because this isn't our normal show, he doesn't get his normal intro either. And of course, we've got Ryan, who's been all over this podcast recently. Obviously, the big match, the centerpiece of this upcoming show is the AEW World Championship match, Jungle Boy versus Kenny Omega. Craig has done the hard work of putting together the statistics from both men across their entire careers so far, or 1v1 careers anyway, in AEW so far. This to me is a very intriguing match on paper, at least from a storyline perspective. But then looking at some of these numbers, it actually gets more interesting. So, Craig, the first thing I want to ask you, what stood out to me is how well it seems that these two are going to match up when you look at what they're able to do from an in-ring perspective. What really stood out to you when putting these stats together, writing a preview up on ProWrestlingMusings.com? What is the most interesting a part of these statistics to you?
Yeah, so Sergi is off doing some like army person stuff, and so I'm cannibalizing Styles Make Fights, and here we have there. So this is Big Match Feel up on the website at the moment. That's the kind of article that goes along with this podcast. Mm-hmm. So the numbers come from the kind of the 2021 1-versus-1 matches that these two guys have had, just traditional rules to keep it simple. I don't know what it would be like if we took Kenny Omega's statistics from that barbed wire match and tried to put them into context. I think that's perhaps a little bit different. So yeah, these two guys have actually had pretty similar match times this year in terms of just one-on-one matches with traditional rules. Both men have just under half an hour, 29:40 for Jungle Boy and 28:30 for Omega. One for one for Jungle Boy, win over Dax Harwood and a loss to Darby Allin, I believe. Kenny Omega has won two one-on-one matches. The thing that you're referring to that matches up really well is the strike rate. So Jungle Boy is throwing on average 115 strikes per hour, scaling that up, and Omega 114, which is, that's an incredibly close comparison when you think, out of their guys that are kind of around about that ballpark. Mm-hmm. In terms of when you... Sorry, I'm elongating my syllables here so I can organize my spreadsheet so I can say this, but it's taking slightly longer than I intended. There we go. So when you look at the other guys around about that kind of area, you've got like 162, 164, 114, 90. Aja Kong, 24 minutes, 46 seconds, only 90 strikes per hour. Matt Sydal, 30 minutes, 51 seconds, 107. Dax Harwood, 28 minutes, 164 strikes per minute. So there's a huge variance that you can kind of have. So for these two guys to be so close for strike rates, in that half-hour period that they've both wrestled is quite interesting, that they've wrestled their two previous matches each at such a similar striking pace. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Ryan, do you find any significance out of that, or is it just random coincidence?
I don't really know. I think that whole conversation is wild to me because even though they, in terms of like strikes, for example, they have similar rates, I don't know how much that actually plays into the story or if it plays into the story at all, just because they're such different wrestlers to begin with. I kind of think that's coincidental. I don't know that the amount of strikes they have against each other are going to make a difference during this match, because clearly it's other aspects of their wrestling repertoires that are going to be more important here. Like Jungle Boy, he uses a heck of a lot more submission moves than Kenny Omega, which kind of surprised me, because when I think about Jungle Boy, his submission moves aren't the thing I think about when I think about him, Obviously, things like fouls and taunts, that's going to be more on Omega's side. But yeah, I guess we'll just have to see how these things play out, because I really strikes, unless it's like strike downs, I don't really see how they will play a bigger role in this match. Obviously, with a lot of wrestling matches, one I'm thinking of right now is that Kota Ibushi versus Taichi match. Basically, the whole thing was kicks. So in stories like that, the strikes will make a lot bigger of a difference. But here, there's so many other things at play. So I could be wrong. Who knows? Maybe the strikes will play a bigger deal than I'm thinking it will. But right now, I don't have any reason to think that the similarity in striking ability will mean anything, I guess.
So I could very easily see the strikes becoming a story, but only on one side. The thing is, in the last couple weeks on Pro Wrestling Musings, we've been analyzing the Omega Okada matches and really taking a deep dive into all that. And one of the things that I talked about on one of the YouTube videos that we released was the fact that Kenny Omega is just robotic when it comes to his striking. Like, his strike rate has basically never changed during that series, and as by extension, basically his entire career. He is always a volume striker. It's always been part of his game, and I think a lot of that is because he is so active when he's wrestling. He wants you to be able to feel that energy. That's the way that he wants to bring the crowd in, and he can do that as a babyface and make the fans cheer for him because, they're getting on board with that energy that they're feeling, and he can do it as a heel because that's how he's able to generate heat. That's kind of his basis. So what's interesting to me is that part of Kenny Omega's game we've just come to expect, but the grapples being basically 2-1 on a per hour basis favoring Omega, that is where he's really stepped up in this heel run, where he has made that jump from, this really active super athlete that he was as a babyface when he came in to now he's really thinking through what he's doing. And obviously he has Don Callis and the other members of the Elite to help him, and that's how he's taking over. So Jungle Boy, from his perspective, I could very easily see a situation where they throw a very similar number of strikes, but in Jungle Boy's case, that's a big deal because, again, I don't think the commentators would actually mention this or go this far, but the idea that Jungle Boy in our heads is keeping up with someone like Kenny Omega, who we've just come to expect is going to throw strikes like a machine. We just know what he's going to do. That I could definitely see being part of the story, and that could then, when it comes to Omega, that's where he needs to start cheating or he needs to start doing other things because he tries to outstrike Jungle Boy, someone that he views as being too young and not experienced enough to even be on his level. That's where he needs to start going into the other aspects of his game, which then opens itself up for the dives from Jungle Boy's perspective. The fact that Omega doesn't even average one dive per hour, it really shows you, one, that there probably is some validity to all of these rumors that he's working hurt, but two, that he has changed his game during this heel championship run.
Yeah, that wasn't rounding. He's done in that 20 whatever minutes, he hasn't done any. Wow. Which is something that I first noticed when he first won the AAA championship. So that was 2019, I think, and he'd been working face throughout that time. And the match in Mexico where he took that title from Phoenix, he was wrestling very heelish mannerisms. This was before he turned heel. In that match, he never dived. He did a lot of power moves, a lot of heel stuff, where throwing Phoenix into the crowd and that. So it does seem to be a very conscious thing from him, is that he just will not leave his feet, or will rarely leave his feet in these kind of matches as a heel.
Wow. Let me ask you, Craig, just real quick. The You Can't Escape, is that counted as a dive?
Yes. Yeah.
So he hasn't even done that during this year.
Quite. He might. So this is just two matches. This will be the match against Phoenix and another 1v1 match that he'll have had this year, which I can't find on the top of my head. Quite often what happens with the You Can't Escape is that the moonsault gets blocked.
True.
Which so all of these numbers are just for moves that hit.
Interesting. Okay, all right. That's interesting.
That would be my guess, but it might be that in those two matches he hasn't actually hit it.
Yeah, no, that would make sense. The only thing I can think of is I thought he hit it against Phoenix, but no, that was the lead up to the German off the second rope spot that they did, I think. Anyway, okay, yeah. Whatever. The point is,
I would be fairly confident I would have caught it.
Yeah, the point is he hasn't hit a dive yet, which is incredible considering his level of athleticism. So Ryan, let me ask you this. One of the things that I find interesting is when you get into the bottom levels of this graphic, then you see a very significant advantage for Jungle Boy with the submissions that you mentioned, and I think that is just all about trying to get that snare trap over. And obviously that's what he used to beat Dax Harwood. So we're trying to make people believe that this is a big deal here for Jungle Boy, that he can actually do this. And what's also surprising to me is even though Omega has obviously a clear lead when it comes to fouls and taunts, things that we would expect from the heels, Jungle Boy himself averages 6 fouls and 12 taunts an hour. That's more than you would expect from a traditional babyface. Obviously, there's no doubt that Jungle Boy is a pure babyface. There's no heel tendencies from him at all, at least none that I've noticed. But those bottom three numbers in a vacuum would seem to suggest that maybe there is something heelish going on here for Jungle Boy. So why does that work for him, in your opinion?
Well, before I answer that, Craig, what would you count as a foul in this case?
So this must be my most asked question. The stats come from football, from watching football, and they tend to have fouls in those football stats. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more cut and dry what's a foul in football and what's not, because the referee very clearly blows the whistle and gives a free kick.
Right.
Yeah.
In wrestling, I call fouls as things that would get the guy disqualified, elicits a 5 count, or just gets like the referee, waving their arms about and shouting at them. So things, like eye pokes and stuff like that. Essentially, the fouls, I would say, are the thing that they really do is they show who's playing heel and who's playing face.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they're used for. But I also argue that if we're treating this like pretend sport, then, using a foul is like an unfair advantage, if that makes sense.
That does. So yeah. What were a couple examples of Jungle Boy fouling that you noticed while taking these stats? Because I assume that even the actual act of fouling is different for Jungle Boy than it is for Kenny Omega.
Right.
Yes. So I'm not going to be able to pluck that out of my head. I know against Darby Allin, Jungle Boy essentially didn't really foul at all. So that means it's probably been against Dax Harwood. What I can vaguely remember about Jungle Boy is he tends to give things back. If you think back to his match against MJF at Revolution 2020, it was quite heated, and there was a lot of Jungle Boy. There was I know what I'm trying to say here. There was instances of him kind of taking the mickey slightly out of MJF back in response. That kind of thing. In terms of why he's got a few fouls here, it'll have been that match against Dax Harwood, because it was very heated at times.
Yeah.
And in fact, Jungle Boy, where are we? Jungle Boy used 3 fouls against Dax Harwood.
Okay. So
again, I couldn't tell you exactly what they were. It might have been him pushing Harwood into a barricade or just something like that.
But so to kind of connect it back to the concept of fouling in football, you have it's essentially, you can have a heel doing it to get heat, but you could have instances where a babyface is doing it, and it's kind of like that's the idea of like a smart foul almost. Like it's not a dirty kind of thing. It's more just it is against the rules. But in the case of Jungle Boy versus a heel, if he's getting fired up and doing something that elicits a 5 count or something like that, it's not. It wouldn't draw him heat, or heel heat anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So to go off of that, basically, by the sounds of it, whenever Jungle Boy fouls, it's basically as a means of retaliation against the heel. in whatever
Yes.
match he's in. So I don't really necessarily think that's at all heelish, or that this means that he could potentially be heelish down the line. I just think this shows that he's a fiery babyface, honestly, because
His
even
number's
like
very low.
even the best baby faces, the best good guys, they're gonna foul if it's a matter of the 5 count or whatnot. And it just means that they're hyped up to be there, that they want to win bad. It doesn't necessarily inform their character beyond the fact that they're motivated to do what they got to do to beat the bad guy and get justice,
Can
I guess.
just give you context for Jungle Boy? So I have 122 people on my list for 2021 that I've taken numbers for that have appeared on Dynamite or pay-per-view. This includes people from the Young Bucks, who have wrestled the most, all the way down to Cole Carter and Chandler Hopkins, who have both wrestled 52 seconds each. So
I can't even believe it's that long.
In that list of 102 people, if you sort it by their foul rate, Jungle Boy is 76th with 6 fouls a minute. At the top of that list, you've got Private Party with 73 an hour, 73 fouls an hour.
Wow.
So he's, what did I say there? Jungle Boy is 76th. When you sort it by fouls, when you sort it by time in the ring, out of that 122, Jungle Boy is 24th. So he's, in terms of foul rate, his fouls are minuscule. He's barely fouling anyone. Tiny bit more on that, just to give you a little bit. So Eddie Kingston, face kind of tweener, 22.7 fouls an hour. Who else we got? Hikaru Shida, very face, 17.4. John Moxley, 15.6. Cody Rhodes, 14.6. So again, like all these guys that are seen as like proper faces. Adam Page, 8 per hour. Orange Cassidy, 6.1, tiny bit ahead of Jungle Boy, who's got 5.9. So yeah, he does foul, but bear in mind these things are scaled up. So it's that number is actually very, very small, and it's mostly just him retaliating against people that are fouling him.
Yeah, I mean, so that would tell me that AEW as a whole is they like that idea of babyface intensity. That's something that they will tell their baby faces to really go hard in, and so if you have, especially in a case of John Moxley or Eddie Kingston, it's all about context, I think, when that happens. And so Jungle Boy, it's the same. And to me, what stands out is the fact that Jungle Boy, even at such a young age and with very little experience on this level, especially going up against one of the greatest of all time in Kenny Omega, Jungle Boy kind of has that instinct already. It seems like he knows what he's supposed to do, where he's supposed to be, and how to get the crowd to kind of go in and out of those peaks and troughs, if you will. If you're talking about cheering for the babyface, the crowd can't be, 100% fired up the whole match. And it seems like Jungle Boy really does understand that. And so he's kind of, any match that I see him in, he draws my eye just because I know that I'm supposed to be watching him. And it's easy to watch him. You know what I mean? It's hard to describe. But I think that his instincts for pro wrestling are far ahead of anyone of his age that I would expect, especially for a babyface. It's very difficult to be a babyface in today's pro wrestling.
Well, so to go off of that, he's been wrestling, or at least training to become a wrestler since he was like 12 years old. He knew Luchasaurus as a child, So he's been in this for such a long time. Even if the amount of matches he's had doesn't necessarily reflect that, he's been wrestling for a pretty good amount of time. So if we could always say that he is not as experienced on a bigger stage, but he's at least been putting in the groundwork to get to the level where he is for a heck of a long time. And yeah, so another thing I think is pretty impressive that I didn't even really think about for a while. When you look at Jungle Boy and Kenny Omega and their career trajectories, throughout their time in AEW for a while. In terms of how many matches they've actually competed in, they've been pretty damn close to the top the entire time. And the only, like, I think I read Jungle Boy has had 85 matches for the company, starting in May 2019, Double or Nothing. So he's been wrestling a ton. And Kenny Omega was pretty much at that level up until he turned heel. And that's when everything started dipping off, and he's at like 60 matches in AEW so far. But overall, we could talk about how Jungle Boy is not as well established, but I think that's kind of a weird misconception, because he is a lot more established than AEW is treating him, as a lot of the other wrestlers he competes against consider him. So I think that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. See how the announcers, the commentators, the other wrestlers around him are treating him, and see if that matches up with the actual experience he has had in the company or in wrestling as a whole.
Well, I kind of like
He's
that
got
part.
time, I suppose.
Yeah, well, he definitely does. He definitely does.
He's very young.
What I really like about it is the fact that when you contrast that with Kenny Omega, who has been around for such a long time and competing at this level for such a long time, that basically anyone that he's been against, he treats them like this. But especially in the case of Jungle Boy, it's the little things they do that really have gotten me interested in this. I was interested from the very jump, because Jungle Boy was so over and winning the Casino Battle Royale and listening to the fan reaction and everything that happened around that. I was immediately interested because I want to see him wrestle in front of fans and hear that reaction for him. But what has made me more interested is that Kenny and Don Callis absolutely look down on him, right? I mean, they make no bones about this. And they believe that Kenny is just a far superior wrestler to Jungle Boy right now. But the fact that in all of their interactions, Jungle Boy has been smart enough to get the upper hand in each case. And so he demonstrates that babyface fire, but he's not an idiot. He doesn't do dumb stuff.
Thank God.
Right, I know, right? It's refreshing, but it really puts Jungle Boy in his position in this to kind of play off that story that you were talking about, where, yeah, he's young, but he's still experienced. He is a student of the game, if you will, and he's been wrestling for a long time. So he still knows what he's doing, and that's a very interesting story to me, especially because I like Jungle Boy. So and I like him because of his AEW work. So understanding where he's been and his journey in wrestling has been sort of a post facto thing for me. And I think for a lot of people that has been the case. So once again, I think it's a good example of Kenny Omega really thinking these things through. I think that's something that he especially excels at. I mean, he excels at a lot of things, but this one in particular, he thinks through these stories and understands the broader historical context of the people he's working with and the story that he's trying to tell. And I think that this is absolutely intentionally designed to get Jungle Boy over and move him from, young up-and-comer to, hey, but, without you even realizing it, we've demonstrated that Jungle Boy could be a main eventer right now, which is exactly what AEW is trying to do when it comes to building new stars. Kenny Omega was established coming in, but now he's using that star power to build Jungle Boy a potential main event star in the future. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about on the podcast last week, that AEW really excels when they have stars to build off of. So kind of contrasting that when we did with the women's division, where they didn't have that established star coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Jungle Boy is a really likable character, but I think the other string to his bow that he has over a lot of these other guys is how exciting he is in the ring and how good a wrestler he is. That's really interesting, Ryan, what you're saying about how long he's been wrestling. I wasn't really aware of his backstory. And yeah, I thought his connection to Luchasaurus might have just been they had a random kind of good relationship on the road. But yeah, I think what people are going to be really impressed with this match, I do think that it's perhaps going to be maybe even getting towards how good the Phoenix match was. That might just be a clue on how much I like Jungle Boy. The thing that I think might really rocket strap this match is the reversal rates of the two guys. Both of them are on that graphic that you've got there. So these numbers that we're talking about have just been published in an article on ProWrestlingMusings.com called Big Match Feel, and it's Jungle Boy versus Kenny Omega in the title. Their reversal rates are close to 33%. So that means that one in every three moves that their opponent tries to hit them with, they will reverse. Jungle Boy, that number is the 21st best in AEW, and Kenny Omega's is the 39th best in AEW out of that 122 kind of guys. But then if we actually start to eliminate wrestlers that haven't really wrestled very much, so there's a lot of people ahead of them, but a lot of people have only wrestled like 7 minutes, 8 minutes. Cole Carter's up there with 138 reversals per hour, but he's only wrestled 52 seconds. So that's a big scaling. That's not useful data. So we take out everyone that's not really wrestled, like say 20 minutes. The only person that's got a better reversal rate than Jungle Boy in the company that's wrestled for more than 20 minutes is Rey Fenix. Then when you're getting down to Omega, there's only another, what have we got? So Page, Moxley, Matt Sydal, Cody Rhodes. Weird. I wouldn't have thought he'd be a big reverser. Riho, Yuka Sakazaki, and then we have Dax Harwood. So that makes Kenny Omega 8th. So these are two guys that are just going to be going back and forth. And I have come to realize that I really like matches where the guys are almost playing chess and they're flipping out of things or wriggling out of things. And it becomes a case of like who eventually, breaks the code and actually manages to hit their opponent with something, which could be big stakes in this match when Kenny Omega has those huge grapples that he likes to hit. Yeah. Sorry, Griff, you were saying?
I was going to ask you if that's at all connected to all the work you've been doing with the Omega-Okada feud over the last couple weeks. That was certainly a story during that entire series of matches.
What do you mean? I'm not quite... the story, all of them, Okada and the One-Winged Angel.
Yeah, well, I mean, the One-Winged Angel and even to a large extent the Rainmaker from Omega's side. I mean, that's something that Kenny Omega loves to do. I think he understands how dramatic it is to have that one move, which is why it's so important that the One-Winged Angel be protected the way that it is, because you do have that one move, and so the fight over it does become basically a fight. It's like a life and death thing. If you get hit with that move, it's over. And I'm thinking,
yes.
I'm thinking in AEW, his match with Hangman Page in the Eliminator tournament, where the finish came with like 15 seconds of hand fighting over the One-Winged Angel. And that was, again, that story is dramatic because the match is over if Kenny Omega does hit that move.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jungle Boy is a guy that you would think would have a lot of athleticism to be able to pull off some cool One-Winged Angel reversals.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's
Don't know if they'll be able to hit the standards of Orange Cassidy's "just stick your hands in your pockets." I did quite enjoy that one.
I did like that. I guess that's one thing that's interesting. Like when you look at his matches with Okada, and again, I bring this up just because we've been watching these so closely over the last couple of weeks, working on this series and working on the videos that we have. But when you look at those, there's so many creative ways to get out of the One-Winged Angel, and it becomes such a huge part of the physical storytelling going on in that match. I think even though we've seen some of that in AEW, and obviously everyone knows how dangerous the One-Winged Angel is, I don't think we've yet seen any match where there's like 10 attempts, a dozen, 20 attempts at the One-Winged Angel, like we saw against Okada, and someone is able to counter it every single time. We'll see like one or two a match. So I would be willing to see Omega go back into that well again, and maybe it will be against Jungle Boy. I think once he does it, the story will be he understands how dangerous his opponent is, and so he knows that he's got to go with the most dangerous move in wrestling, the move that no one's ever kicked out of, or however they want to sell it today. And so I would like to see a return, not every match, but certain matches, a return to that, let's try a dozen times to put the one-winged angel on and it doesn't work any of those times, because it really, again, just added to the drama between him and Okada.
Yeah, absolutely. And Okada was really good at finding other ways out of it. The one that sticks in my head is he did a proper just like flip out of it, and because he's so kind of tall, it almost looked really quite graceful, rather than when you see the kind of shorter guys flipping out of it with more velocity.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's kind of like Brian Cage doing the buckshot lariat, where it doesn't make sense. Yeah, like it doesn't make physical sense that someone that big is moving like that.
So of course he's gonna stumble,
Oh, well, that's Okada, I guess. That's Okada and Cage. They just do stuff like that. So the bottom line is we're all really excited for this match. I think it's pretty safe to say this could be a very, very fun world title match, and maybe more of a return to the Omega heel style that we've come to, I guess, expect from him over the years. Not that he hasn't been wrestling at that level, obviously, but this is someone I think who could really take advantage of what Kenny Omega is able to do as a heel champion, in my opinion. Maybe I'm just biased because I like Jungle Boy, but I feel like this is a good opponent matchup-wise for Kenny Omega. That isn't the only match on this show, though, so we'll spend a couple minutes talking about the other things that you'll see on the other hour and a half-ish of Dynamite. There's a couple matches already announced, so I guess we'll start with talking about one of the ones that intrigues me, because, again, I'm a big fan of one of the competitors. Chris Statlander is going to take on the Bunny, and I'm a big fan of Chris Statlander. I think she's great. I think at some point she could absolutely be a world champion as soon as they figure out her gimmick and how much they want the kind of alien stuff to be a part of it. But I think in ring she's fantastic, and I think she's a phenomenal athlete. And so I'm excited to see this match. But again, I have heard people say that this isn't advancing necessarily a story, and obviously we do have upcoming a tag match involving the champion, which we talked about at length in our last podcast. But Ryan, to me, whether this advances a story or not, you're seeing two talented in-ring competitors, and you're seeing someone in Chris Statlander that I believe AEW will have plans for going forward. So this excites me enough to be hyped for it. What about you?
Yeah, so maybe it's not hyping or advancing a storyline between both competitors, but I definitely feel like it's advancing Chris Statlander's overall arching story and her progression into the title scene, or at least it looks like where they're trying to progress her into the title scene. Like you said, obviously next week she's going to be in a match also featuring the current AEW Women's Champion, Britt Baker. So I think on that side of things, we obviously have Chris Statlander, who's going to have to obviously prove herself against the Bunny. The Bunny's definitely a great competitor, and I think a great character as well. What intrigues me about this match is that both of them are almost like they almost don't fit in with the rest of the women's division, if you ask me, because Chris Statlander, besides the fact that she's an alien, you have her hanging out with a bunch of the guys, right? Then the Bunny, same thing with her, although obviously she's not an alien. She's hanging out with all of the guys right now, and not really having way too many matches against the women, or generally being aligned with the women. So I think that dynamic is pretty interesting. I almost wish that they did more with the Bunny, because if I'm assuming you two have seen some of her work in Impact Wrestling, especially towards the end of her run, the whole storyline with Rosemary and where she dies in universe. Spoiler alert, sorry. But like clearly she has the acting chops, she has the wrestling ability to be in a better position than she has been. The Bunny's time in AEW has been weird to me. Why do either of you know why she basically took like a 9-month-long break off? Was that an injury, or did she just want time off? Either way, whatever. But
Craig, do you know for sure? Actually, I don't know for sure.
No idea. Who knows? Sorry.
Generally, when that happens, I just assume it's an injury.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it could just be an injury, but so let's just say it was an injury. I'm really surprised that they didn't have her really get back in the swing of things once she came back. They kind of had her just almost kind of like hanging out. They gave her some random matches, but she hasn't been doing a whole lot. So if this match could do a bit to elevate the bunny, not only in the eyes of in kayfabe, I guess, but also in the eyes of management and the fans, I think that this match could be really beneficial for both of them.
Yeah, I can see that. Craig, are you hyped for this match?
No, sorry. I really want to like the women's division, and I really do like it a lot of the time. But it feels like they've pivoted away from the interesting stuff since Britt Baker won. In terms of like the data that I've collected about these two, Chris Statlander's got some pretty impressive grappling numbers. I mean, these numbers are with a pinch of salt because Ali has wrestled just under 50 minutes total in 1v1s on Dynamite this year. Chris Statlander just under 10 minutes. So, but Chris Statlander is almost hitting 65 grapples per hour in those short matches. Ali is more kind of strike-based, 204 strikes per hour. 45 per hour worth of those are strike downs. Again, these numbers are based on short ring times, and what generally happens is the longer that a wrestler wrestles, these numbers get smaller because when they're in smaller matches, shorter matches, then there's less kind of rest time, less selling, things happen quickly. So yeah, lots of grapples from Statlander. In those two matches, Statlander has yet to hit a dive, a submission hold, or use a foul, which is interesting. Whereas Ali has yet to hit a finisher or a dive in her kind of 15 minutes. Don't know what to make of that. Thoughts?
I guess AEW didn't really have plans for Ali. So they didn't need her to do things like that. That's the only thing I can think of. Because I can't think of like a really. She's been involved in stories, but she herself has kind of been an ancillary part of those stories. It was kind of the whole thing between
Brandy thing and the QT thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, and more recently, the whole like her being with the Hardy family office, and they had issues with whoever they were having issues with. It seems until they centered on Christian Cage, they've kind of had issues with anyone that was free on a week-to-week basis. So, she just hasn't felt like a really important part of that story. And that story itself, up until Matt started feuding with Christian, that story didn't really feel like a really important story to begin with. So, that's the only thing I can think.
I would rather see this time going to like the breakdown of Hikaru Shida after losing her championship. I don't know, something like that. Something with there are a few now of kind of big names in that division. Serena Deeb, I love Serena Deeb. Get her wrestling. I had a really cool idea that they used to use the NWA championship almost like a secondary title, and that they could do that with the Impact Knockouts division and have what's her name? Deonna Purrazzo doing what Serena Deeb did, just putting on like title matches, but that aren't for the world title.
Sure.
They kind of used the NWA World's Women's Champion like they used the TNT Championship for the men. And I don't know. I feel like now that Deeb doesn't have that they're kind of missing that extra little thing to fall back on.
I'd agree with you with that, and I would definitely like to see more of the knockouts from TNA or Impact now be able to come over. They do have some real talent over there, and Deonna Purrazzo, I feel like she is a really, really talented wrestler, but some of the stories she's been in just really do not hook me. I mean, they got like this weird retirement angle with Jazz that got shot like 2 weeks before the actual match, and there was some weird stuff that she's been doing that hasn't really connected with me. So yeah, I would like to see her go for more of the work rate kind of stories on AEW, the same way that Serena Deeb and Thunder Rosa did as NWA champs. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is, I think, a parallel to this match over on the men's side. We have Dante Martin versus Matt Sydal. That's been announced. So very much like this one, there's just not a whole lot of story there, but these are two incredibly athletic men who promise to, I think, put on a pretty solid match. This feels like an AEW opener to me. This is going to be fast, and it's going to be a lot of reversals. It's going to be, I think, a lot of dives. Dante Martin, I think, is excellent. I would like to see... I know that Darius is hurt right now, his brother. They're part of Top Flight. Hopefully, when he comes back, I would like to see Top Flight do a little bit more. I would like to see them start to make their way up the tag ranks. Something like the Acclaimed that got really over by working dark and making the most of their opportunities on Dynamite. I would like to see Top Flight do the same. So this might be a little bit of a prelude to that. So I'm flat out excited for this. It's going to be fun, if nothing else. There's no story. I'm just going to enjoy it. And ultimately, that's really what wrestling, I guess, is about. Just make me have fun watching the matches. So, Ryan, what do you think about this one?
I don't have any real insight as to what I would expect from this match. I don't have any idea about underlying story, what they bring to the table besides just insane flippy madness, honestly. So all I could really say about this match is that I think both competitors have been great, but haven't had the chance to really, I guess, really become, or really have that one defining match in AEW, you know? So I still call them Airwolf and Angel Dorado. I don't even call them their real names. But so yeah, I mean when they had their tag team on the Indies, when they were wrestling up in Minnesota, they were killing it, and they were having awesome matches. I think one of their defining matches for me is their match at Game Changer Wrestling for the Culture, their match against the team of Christian Casanova and Tasha Steeles and the team of PB Smooth and Trey Lamar. Now, obviously, Matt Sydal has had excellent matches elsewhere. Whether you want to talk about his time in WWE, New Japan, wherever. But neither competitor has had like that one defining AEW match that's going to set them up for success, I guess. So I'm excited to see whether this match is going to be the one to do that. And, you know, I think another added thing that I actually just remembered, they've actually had a match against each other on AEW Dark. So I'm going to have to rewatch that and see if there's any callbacks to that match or whatnot. So there is a tiny bit of a story now that I'm remembering that happened.
Yeah,
I think that's the story. I think the tweet story. I'm saying it's a story. I think it was just a tweet. The tweet went out saying that Tony Khan was so impressed with that match that he thought they deserved this slot on Dynamite, and that's why this match is happening.
So basically, at this point, the story is these two dudes are gonna show out. Basically, show up, show out, yeah. Show off.
Well,
yeah. So that's
they probably
fine with
will.
Me. Honestly, that's totally fine with me, and I hope that this does become each of their, as of now, their defining matches. As they continue on, they'll continue improving. Not that Matt Sydal needs improving, but they'll continue doing their thing, and they'll continue gaining experience within the company, and they'll continue going, and we'll see. I don't think we've seen their individual peaks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Matt Sydal is capable of. I mean, obviously he's capable, but he is in a position where it would be very easy for him to put any of these kinds of guys over. I think in both cases, Seidel and Martin, they've had matches with members of the Elite. I mean, I think Matt Seidel's best match in AEW was against Kenny Omega, and Martin's best match was as part of Top Flight against the Young Bucks. So they both have these matches, and again, is it considered that match? No, because they didn't win, but they're matches that I certainly remember, and so I guess that's cool. What I really like about Matt Seidel is his reversal rate specifically is we don't have a per hour because he hasn't wrestled enough time. I think he's wrestled 15 minutes, but he's had 33 reversals in that 15 minutes. So if you were to kind of extrapolate that out, that would be one of, if not the best reversal rate among male singles wrestlers in AEW. That makes it very easy to watch his matches because there is not long drawn out heat segments. They're very, very fast, and that will definitely play into where Dante Martin is coming from. So I think these two just really play to each other's strengths.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to go on to. Matt Seidel's quite interesting in that he's wrestled almost 31 minutes on Dynamite this year. However, he's lost all 3 of those matches. His reversal rate's really high. It's one of the higher ones on the list, full stop. He's only bettered by 2 wrestlers that have wrestled longer than him, and only like a couple within the kind of 10 that have wrestled slightly less than him. So he's very much up there. The other thing that he does is he goes for pinfalls a lot, but quite often that's a mark of somebody they use that quite often to show that somebody isn't going to win. Like they make a lot of pin attempts and they get kicked out of. Mm-hmm. So with Matt Seidel having had three losses in half an hour, he's essentially the Varsity Blondes of the male singles division in that he picks up wins on Dark but never wins on Dynamite. Varsity Blondes are 0-3 on Dynamite this year. So yeah, it's a lot of goes for a lot of pins and he gets a lot of reversals. Whether or not that'll be the same in this match, where he's potentially going to win, is he the? Wow, that's really interesting. What? Yeah, I wonder why this match is happening. So yeah, maybe they put on a banger and Matt Seidel wins and it's really interesting. Mm-hmm. Or I mean, I can't see Dante Martin winning, but then again, why have they booked this? Maybe it's just for a bit of a firecracker with Matt Seidel then going on to get brutally squished by Miro.
Right.
I don't know. Well, if that is eventually what's going to happen, didn't Dante Martin have a match against Miro a few weeks ago? I think it was right. Mm-hmm. I think it was right before Miro won the TNT championship, or was it his first match as TNT champion? I can't remember.
So Miro murdered Dante Martin in 3 minutes and 7 seconds.
Right.
Miro did so at such a pace that if you rounded up those 3 minutes to an hour, Miro would have got in 404 moves, which is a lot. Dante Martin did a few dives and reversals, and he went for a few pin attempts, but he got squished.
Yeah, I definitely remember that, though, because as far as squash matches go, it really was not bad. I mean, there's obviously a cap to these things, but, you know, it got pretty close to that cap, in my opinion. Because I really like Top Flight. I think they really have something. And I think that in a lot of ways, they are capable of being the exact same kind of baby faces that the Young Bucks try to be. But I think Top Flight has more of a ceiling there, just because when the Young Bucks become baby faces, they're very reliant on their opponents to be able to draw that heat. Sometimes especially Matt Jackson, will oversell and kind of go into the surreal kind of territory with the way that he acts, which makes him a great heel. But as a babyface, sometimes it doesn't really connect. I think Top Flight are understated enough that they can basically play that same role and just jump out of the arena and get people to like them just because of how athletic and great they are. And, you know, the way they sell and kind of their facial expressions and all of that makes for some convincing baby faces, in my opinion. So I would actually expect Matt Seidel to potentially play the heel in this match here. I mean, he's not a heel, but for the purposes of this, I don't think Dante Martin is capable of being a heel in any way.
Maybe like Tanahashi when he takes on the Young Lions. Like he's quite, he just plays quite like, I don't know how to describe it. Like he's kind of like stern and quite disapproving of their attempts to wrestle him, I would suggest.
Yeah, I could definitely see that same thing. I mean, Matt Sydal is definitely a babyface, but it would be easy enough to tell the story of him just kind of not appreciating the young up and comer, trying to outfly him and whatever story they want to tell. This to me, like I said, has all the markings of an AEW opening match, and relative to what we saw, when you compare it to the opening match over the last couple weeks, obviously we just saw the MMA cage match, and we've seen a Christian Cage match that opened it. Okay, MMA cage, it was in a cage. Christian Cage, the person. Either way, those matches were not they were not typical AEW matches, AEW opening matches. So this may very well just be a return to typical AEW opening match style here, which that's cool with me. The last match announced on this card is definitely the one with the most story going in. Hangman Page versus Powerhouse Hobbs. You'd have to assume that Brian Cage is going to be involved in some capacity somehow. I don't exactly know what, but there is a lot of story going into this. There's been a lot of talk about Hangman, and obviously he was asked about Kenny Omega's world title match, and he's still uncomfortable talking about Kenny Omega and talking about potentially being a world champion, challenging Kenny Omega, all part of this very long-term story that we're right in the middle of. And as a result, this feud with Team Taz, for me, it feels like it's really more about Team Taz on the outside than it is about Hangman, because I think the whole idea is we're trying to show that Hangman is past all of these things that we've seen from him, and he is really getting ready to be a world champion at some point, which is a story that is now progressively working better for me than it had over the last several months. So as far as storytelling goes, there's a lot of unpredictability when it comes to this match, and I'm excited to see it. Ryan, this is my most excited. I'm most excited for this match on the card, other than the AEW World Championship, obviously. So how about you? Is this making you more excited than the other two that we've discussed?
In terms of storyline alone, yes, this is definitely the match I'm most excited for. Now, just to backtrack, the Kenny Omega and Jungle Boy match, I think I'm more excited about that match because I like Jungle Boy as a person, and because I think that match is going to be an awesome match rather than from their storyline. Now, the Adam Page Powerhouse Hobbs match, from a storyline perspective, definitely most excited for, because over the past how many weeks, we've seen Adam Page fight basically everyone in Team Taz. He fought Brian Cage twice, lost the first time, and then won the last time they fought. Then, of course, he beat Ricky Starks. So now we have Powerhouse Hobbs. And I think the result is predictable. No matter whether Brian Cage gets involved and costs Powerhouse Hobbs the match, no matter how you want to play out the end of the match, I think it's kind of obvious that Adam Page will end up winning, because ultimately that will be the best way to continue the descent of the Team Taz faction,
Right.
And yeah, like I said last time I was on the podcast, anytime we have these matches where Team Taz members lose, you get closer and closer and closer to them breaking apart. While I'm not sure that this match is going to be the one to officially break them apart, I think it will definitely still cause a huge crack, the huge crack that's already there, to further expand,
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this because even besides storyline, I think that obviously Adam Page has proven himself, and so has Powerhouse Hobbs, but I think this is still going to be Hobbs' most high-profile match, I guess you could say. And not just because the storyline basically dictates this to be his most high-profile match. So overall, I'm excited. I think the only issue I have with this, because I believe Adam Page is gonna win this, I'm afraid about how they reestablish Powerhouse Hobbs, because this is gonna be, I guess this is gonna be his second big loss in only a few months, because he lost against Christian Cage already in a singles match. So I'm interested to see how they reestablish him. Once I'm acting as if Adam Page is definitely going to win. I don't know that for sure. Let's just make that clear. I don't know that for sure. I feel like it would make most sense storyline wise, but you never know. So
I think is the tease not the, or maybe the kind of assumed tease is that Hobbs might beat him because he's the fifth seed in the same manner that Cage did.
Well, they did mention it, so I suppose they are kind of teasing that in a way. And AEW has shown, with specifically Hangman Page, that a singles loss doesn't like doom you forever. I mean, Page is still over whether or not he lost to Brian Cage in that context. So I suppose that is on the table. But this time you have the entirety of Team Taz that is fracturing around Will Hobbs, whereas when Brian Cage did it, obviously those tensions were there, but Cage was able to just, fight his style and beat Hangman, and Hobbs may not be able to do that.
Right. I think that in terms of wrestling styles, it's funny because when Adam Page teamed with 10, we saw that he was definitely capable of doing this powerhouse style, but compared to Powerhouse Hobbs, those styles are still really, really different. So that dynamic is going to be really cool to watch. Powerhouse Hobbs is the more obvious powerhouse, but then you got Adam Page, who is more than capable of wrestling that style if he wants. So who knows? The best part about this feud to me is the fact that every single member of Team Taz has lost against Page, and at this point, if the same thing happens to Hobbs, Hook is going to be the only guy who will be able to, establish himself against a name like that. So I really hope that ends up happening at some point, Adam Page versus Hook. But yeah, I could rant about how great Hook is going to be and how I would fantasy book him, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'll do that.
We'll save that for the Hook Gang podcast that we've been planning. Definitely.
Oh yeah, for sure. 100%.
Overall, this is a Dynamite that really excites me. There's some matches on here. I think AEW does best when there are matches that you can kind of fantasy book in your head a little bit and play with the different stories that could be happening, and there's lots of unpredictability here because, I mean, even for something like Hangman and Will Hobbs, where under normal circumstances you would say, obviously Hangman's going to win this, there's going to be some kind of Team Taz something going on, AEW has shown that they're not even that predictable. So even with that match, there's a possibility that something else happens and Hobbs ends up picking up the win. So it really excites me. And even though I'm fairly positive that Kenny Omega is going to retain the championship over Jungle Boy, what we know is AEW does use matches like that to build up to establish that there are, top main event level guys. They did it with MJF, for example. So now it would be their opportunity to do it with Jungle Boy and really establish him as a main eventer going forward. And if you listen to the podcast 2 weeks ago, I think, you'll know my thoughts on maybe how Jungle Boy could potentially win this match and how that would all look. But you'll have to go back to that to listen to it. We will have another episode of the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast for you, obviously, after a very special Saturday Dynamite, talking about everything. We may very well have a new world champion. I mean, possibly, probably not, but I suppose it's within the realm of possibility. So if you're on Apple Podcasts, if you're on Spotify, wherever you are, then leave us a 5-star review. Stick around for that if you're on YouTube. Subscribe. Check out our couple videos about the Kenny Omega Kazuchika Okada rivalry and about how great those two guys are. That was basically just an opportunity for me to gush about how these guys might be the two greatest ever. So if you're curious about that, go check those videos out. And again, we will have this podcast for you after Dynamite. Ryan, please tell the people where they can find you.
My Twitter is going to be in the bio wherever you're listening. I'm still doing the roundtables, Pro Wrestling Musings releases. I just recently had a Kazuchika Okada Kenny Omega article released. So check out the whole series, but specifically check out the article about their Dominion 2017 one, because that was the one I did. Otherwise, still going to do podcast. I think my next date is sometime in July. So see you there, I guess.
All right. Craig, please tell the people where they can find you.
You can find me on @CraigPW Musings. Please check out Griff's videos on YouTube. Those last two about Kazuchika Okada, Kenny Omega were really good. I really enjoyed those. I don't know, Griff. I thought that there was quite a chunk here to talk about in terms of a preview. It might be something that we look at doing again in the future.
Hey, you know what? I really enjoy things like this. So if this is something that you out there would be interested in seeing more from us, then between Craig collating all these stats and between obviously Sergi's normal work with Styles Make Fights, there's lots of preview things that happen on Pro Wrestling Musings. So leave a comment or reach out to us on Twitter if this is something you'd like to see us do again.
Yeah, or it might make sense to keep it for every second week or the odd week where there are big matches, just to keep it fresh. Don't know, thinking out loud now. Something we can chat about another time. But check out the website. There's really, really good stuff on the website at the moment. And the YouTube channel's good too. Thank you for listening. Griff, where can they find you?
Well, my personal YouTube channel is over at General Admission Wrestling. And if you are not on YouTube already, then while you're there checking that out, also head on over to the Pro Wrestling Musings YouTube channel. Craig has been very kind about the videos that we've been putting up over there. It's been a team effort for the Omega Okada series, and that is absolutely my favorite thing that has happened since I joined Pro Wrestling Musings, because we just said we have so many writers and so many people that have taken a look at that series of matches and broken it down in all kinds of different ways. In my opinion, it really gives you a new appreciation for how great those matches were, beyond just being able to look at it and say, wow, these were great matches. Now we can actually tell you why they were so great, why you liked them so much, and why Omega and Okada themselves are such phenomenal professional wrestlers. So that series is on ProWrestlingMusings.com and on the Pro Wrestling Musings YouTube channel. If you're already there, thank you so much for watching us. Leave a subscription. We will see you for our post-Dynamite Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. But until then, enjoy some wrestling. And, the weather's getting nice here in the States. So go enjoy some good weather. We'll see you for that podcast. We appreciate you.